How world's largest ship sinks. Facts about Titanic. During her maiden voyage, the luxurious liner RMS Titanic sideswiped an iceberg and sank early on April 15, 1912, off the coast of Newfoundland in the North Atlantic. More than 500 people died in the catastrophe out of the 2,240 passengers and personnel on board. Numerous novels, articles, and movies, such as the 1997 Titanic movie starring Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio, have been influenced by the Titanic. The narrative of the ship has become well known as a cautionary tale about the dangers of human hubris. The RMS Titanic's construction. In the first half of the 20th century, there was fierce competition among competing shipping lines, which led to the creation of the Titanic. The White Star Line in particular found itself in a steamer dominance competition with Cunard, a venerable British company with two distinctive ships that were among the most opulent and sophisticated of their day. The Mauretania of Cunard set a record for the quickest average speed for a transatlantic voyage when it entered service in 1907, 23.69 knots, or 27.26 miles per hour, and it kept that record for 22 years. The same year Lusitania was launched and hailed for its magnificent interiors, Cunard's other masterpiece. On May 7, 1915, a German U-boat torpedo sank the Lusitania, killing approximately 1,200 of the 1959 passengers and crew. This horrific event prompted the United States to enter World War I. The second of these three ocean liners, the Titanic, saw construction start in March 1909 at the enormous Harland Wolff shipyard in Belfast, Ireland, and proceed nonstop for 2 years. On May 31, 1911, Belfast's enormous Titanic hull, at the time the largest movable man-made object in the world, moved down the slipways and into the River Lagan. The launching, which took a little under a minute and went off without a hitch, was attended by more than 100,000 people. The ship's hull was promptly hauled to a massive fitting out dock where tens of thousands of workers would spend most of the following year erecting the ship's decks, opulent interiors, and 29 enormous boilers that would power her two primary steam engines. The fatal flaws of the unsinkable Titanic. Some theories contend that Titanic's design, which was hailed by many as cutting edge, doomed the ship from the start. The Olympic-class ships included 15 watertight bulkhead compartments with electronic watertight doors that could be opened individually or simultaneously by a switch on the bridge, as well as a double bottom. Because of these watertight bulkheads, Shipbuilder magazine declared the Olympic liners to be practically unsinkable in a special edition devoted to them. The individual bulkheads were watertight, but the walls separating them only reached a few feet above the waterline, making it possible for water to seep from one compartment into another, especially if the ship started to list or pitch forward. This design flaw was a major contributing factor in the Titanic's sinking. The Titanic carried too few lifeboats, which was the second major safety oversight that led to the loss of so many people. There were just 16 boats, plus 4 Engelhardt collapsible, which could hold 1,178 passengers. Up to 2,435 passengers could board the Titanic, and with a crew of about 900, she could accommodate more than 3,300 people. As a result, only 1/3 of the passengers could fit in the lifeboats even when they were fully occupied during an emergency evacuation. The number of lifeboats provided by the Titanic met the needs of the British Board of Trade, despite being utterly insufficient by today's standards. Those who rode the Titanic. When Titanic left Southampton, England, on its inaugural voyage on April 10, 1912, it caused quite a stir. The ship set sail for New York with 240 passengers and crew, or souls, as they were formerly referred to in the maritime business, generally in connection with a sinking on board after making stops at Cherbourg, France, and Queenstown, now known as Cove, Ireland. Many of these people were high-ranking officials, wealthy industrialists, dignitaries, and celebrities, befitting the first transatlantic voyage of the world's most famous ship. J. Bruce Ismay, managing director of the White Star Line, came first, followed by Thomas Andrews, the shipbuilder from Harland and Wolff. J.P. Morgan, a financier who controlled the White Star Line through the International Mercantile Marine Shipping Trust and who had appointed Ismay as a corporate officer, was not present. Morgan had intended to board the Titanic with his friends, but he abruptly decided against it due to some work-related issues. John Jacob Astor IV, the heir to the Astor family fortune, was the richest passenger. A year earlier, he made headlines when he wed Madeline Talmadge Force, then 18 years old, just after divorcing his first wife. Isidore Straus, the elderly owner of Macy's, and his wife Ida were among the notable passengers, as were industrialist Benjamin Guggenheim and his mistress, valet, and chauffeur, as well as widow and heiress Margaret Molly Brown, who earned the moniker the Unsinkable Molly Brown by keeping things calm and orderly while the lifeboats were being loaded and lifting the spirits of her fellow survivors. Along with academics, tourists, journalists, and other passengers who would typically enjoy a level of care and facilities comparable to first class on most other ships, the personnel tending to this group of first-class luminaries were primarily traveling second class. Titanic leaves port. There were a few strange things about Titanic's April 10th voyage from Southampton. In one of her bunkers, a minor coal fire was found, in frightening but regular occurrence on steamships of the day. To get to the source of the fire, the stovers shoveled the flaming coal away and hosed it down. The stokers were instructed to continue putting out the fire at sea after the captain and chief engineer determined that it was unlikely to have caused any damage that may have compromised the hull structure. A theory advanced by a small number of Titanic specialists claims that the crew attempted a full speed crossing once the fire grew unmanageable after the ship departed Southampton, traveling so quickly they were unable to escape the fateful impact with the Iceberg. Iceberg is struck by the Titanic. After 4 days of smooth sailing, on April 14th, the Titanic began to receive sporadic reports of ice from other ships, even though she was traveling in calm waters and under a clear, moonless sky. An iceberg was spotted dead ahead at around 11:30 p.m. by a lookout, who subsequently sounded the warning bell and called the bridge. When the engines were suddenly reversed and the ship was quickly turned, Titanic appeared to skim along the side of the berg rather than collide with it directly, scattering ice chunks over the forward deck. The lookouts were happy to learn there would be no collision. They were completely unaware of the iceberg's sharp underwater spur, which sliced a 300-foot gash in the ship's hull below the waterline. The bow of the doomed ship was dramatically tilted downward, allowing seawater to spill from one bulkhead into the adjacent compartment, and 5 compartments had already started to fill with seawater by the time the captain and Thomas Andrews from Harland Wolff inspected the damaged region. After making a fast calculation, Andrews predicted that the Titanic could float for at least an hour and a half. The skipper then gave the order for the lifeboats to be loaded after telling his wireless operator to ask for assistance. Lifeboats of the Titanic. The first lifeboat was lowered a little more than an hour after the ship made contact with the iceberg, signaling the start of a mostly disjointed and unplanned evacuation. Only 28 passengers were on board the 65-person capacity vessel when it departed. Tragically, this was to become the standard. In the turmoil and panic in the crucial minutes before Titanic sank to the bottom of the ocean, practically every lifeboat would launch pitifully underfilled, some with just a few passengers. Women and children boarded the boats first by maritime regulations. Men were only allowed to embark if no women or children were present. However, many of the victims were women and children as a result of chaotic processes that first failed to transfer them to the boats. Overcoming Andrews' prediction, Titanic tenaciously maintained its buoyancy for nearly 3 hours. During those moments, both exceptional bravery and craven cowardice were displayed. Titanic is lost. The most famous passengers on the ship each reacted to the situation in a way that contributed significantly to the Titanic legend. The managing director of White Star, Ismay, assisted in loading some of the boats and later climbed onto a collapsible while it was being brought down. Even though there were no women or children nearby when he abandoned the ship, he would never get over the humiliation of surviving the catastrophe when so many others died. This is the end of today's video. Give your precious feedback in our comments section below. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos.